bring to you the executive director of the March on Washington, the man who organized this whole thing, Mr. Bayard Rustin.
Ladies and gentlemen, the first demand is that we have effective civil rights legislation, no compromise, no filibuster, and that it includes public accommodations, decent housing, integrated education, FAPC, and the right to vote. What do you say?
It came out of the vision of, and again, another name we can't lift up enough, it came out of Harold Dufour Anderson, who was a staff person at the AIDS Action Committee at the time, who was working in a part of the organization in client benefits, client services, but focusing on minority outreach. And this came out of the Minority Affairs Committee, which had been a committee of the board, which I was on, and that's how I got involved with the organization before moving up the ranks. And Harold had a vision of really thinking about how do we engage communities of color, because like many organizations in major cities that respond to the needs of populations, very often people of color are absent from the creation and the decision making.
From the table.
We're not at the table. Mm-hmm. And AIDS Action, which is near and dear to my heart, was no different in that way. And that was also true in the epidemic. It really began to be identified as a white gay man's disease, and information wasn't getting into our hands in community, into black and brown hands, one, because many people who were doing the work didn't know where we were and how to reach us. And two, there was a belief that this wasn't our issue in our communities. And Bayard Rustin tried, Harold's vision was to bring the community in. Is that a fair?
Yeah, yes, that's a very fair. With a lot of community engagement and kind of primarily focusing on that community, as Gary is speaking of, that's kind of marginalized, was seen as marginalized then and considered marginalized to some extent now, unfortunately, to get them more actively involved and to get them more informed. Right. So when you're informed, you can make better decisions.
Right. And out of that, so that we end up seeing things like the He Touched Me ministries. We see programs led by the late Belynda Dunn, who created He Touched Me, who's going into beauty parlors. We're going into barbershops. We're going into the traditional churches, talking to getting ministers engaged. We learned a lot from those sorts of processes. Ministers are great, but it's really the first person in the church, the spouse, who's going to do some of this other ancillary work, because ministers may agree to come to a meeting and then something happens to a parishioner and they've got to go to the bedside to minister to. And so you need someone else who's going to show up. So it was looking at unconventional places. If you don't grow up, let me just say this, if you don't grow up black, you don't understand the relationship that black men have with a barbershop.
That's
For
true.
some of us, it's traumatic if you're queer. Some of those can be interesting territories, but it's also a way in which you learn how to negotiate. You learn community. You learn how to listen to stuff and think that makes no sense in the world. But you also learn a sense of community and getting information out into the community. Why would white providers know that? Because it's just not who they are.
Under the auspices of AIDS Action, which we mentioned is one of the leading providers of services for people with HIV/AIDS and the population of those at risk. So again, under the leadership of Harold Dufour Anderson, who's
the visionary leadership,
who is now a member, you know, we spoke to the powers that be to say we wanted something that would really identify with that particular population, the LGBTQ population of color, and the dynamics that they were dealing with or the challenges they were dealing with as it relates to HIV/AIDS. So we came up with the name. Bayard Rustin seemed the appropriate, and even more so today, the more we talk, the appropriate name to use, because he was someone, as we mentioned earlier, dealing with social justice, social change, tenets of life. You know, so in its development, we would always have a keynote speaker that he or she would also come with the thrust and the objective of more or less kind of getting us to be in solidarity with what our goal was, the objective. The objective was, perhaps for me too, as I see it, never feel frightened by what's happening. You're not alone. We can work at this together. And of course, there are powers that we have to work with, like a present administration notwithstanding, but let's make sure our voices are being heard. Stand up for who you are, basically.
It's also, it's so important, again, because history, I'm a bit of a historian in my scholarship. And what fascinates me is we really take and forget history very quickly.
Oh, yes, we do.
It is not just the Republicans. We had to also fight Democrats. You know, in this state, there was a lot that had to be done to move on message around saving lives, and access to, the Dukakis administration, and we now look at Governor Dukakis through a slightly different lens. But he was not always the most progressive around some issues. Nope. And, it might seem harmless now, but it wasn't in the 80s. And so that's really important to look at. AIDS Action Committee also deserves credit for investing in its vision, for funding its vision. And so Bayard Rustin was an event where you could go into a space from Villa Victoria, Jorge Hernandez Conference Center, to now the Kenneth Jeff Dunn F. Kennedy Library, and you could hear or listen to Joseph Beam, Bill T. Jones, watch him dance the alphabet as his speech. He danced for us.
Goodness.
And spontaneously danced at the Jorge Hernandez Cultural Center. To listen to Barbara Smith, Jewel Gomez, to be able to hear Essex Hemphill,
Keith Borkin.
It was just
voices within our community that were giving voices.
Legendary.
Yes, legendary.
Legendary.
That were giving voices to what the mission was. And so you had people who would definitely hear them as well.
But I think to keep in mind that the Bayard Rustin Committee really needed to be a part of the community. And I think by these guys forming this and bringing it where this event becomes annual every year, it also keep in minds of the people that lives in our community that this is not over. AIDS is not over.
No.
You know,
Definitely not.
there's a lot better medications, all of these things, but there are still young people today that don't even know their status. And if this committee can help in getting people to just get out and get tested, knowing their status, it helps them and it also helps the community.
Exactly.
And I think having a breakfast like this is needed for that.
You know, there's this sense, it's a piggyback what Nigel's saying, like even presently, the administration feels they should push for abstinence-only education for the young people. That's not where we need. We need comprehensive sex education that incorporates LGBTQ health issues. So that these younger generation, as Nigel's speaking of, would know that this is still something that's prevalent. HIV is still prevalent. So the breakfast is one way we use that as a vehicle to get to everyone, to remind them that this is still something that's there, but we can also make an dent in it by speaking to your politicians, voting the right way, and let your voices be heard.
I think that the mere fact that we chose him and that Harold and those that were there, Gary notwithstanding, chose Bayard Rustin because he too, as you mentioned, was an unsung hero. He's someone that they often call the architect of the 1963 March on Washington. You have to picture this, someone without internets, without iPhones, not single-handedly, because he did have a cadre of folks that worked with him, but he was the one who felt like this is a way to get to the masses of people. And his philosophy of social justice and social change is what we add into the Bayard Rustin Breakfast in terms of whenever we have a speaker, he or she speaks to those issues that we're talking about as it relates to dealing with communities of color and HIV/AIDS. But I think one of the things that's important to mention about Bayard Rustin, this was a struggle that he had because he was in the so-called Martin Luther King cabinet, and there were those in that cabinet that were kind of adverse to him being a part of this, even though King knew that he was someone he could lean on and definitely make movement of. But there were those who were feeling like because he was openly gay, and a Quaker, that he was not someone who was worthy of leading leading the forefront in terms of where we got to, but he is someone that I think we utilize his name within the context of this breakfast because he was someone who we need to continually hold up. I like, as Gary says, hold up his name for what he's done for history.
How much of a giant was he?
He was huge. He was huge.
In the American civil rights movement.
He was huge. He was huge.
Yes.
And his vision, if it were not for Bayard Rustin is the person that really introduced Dr. King to living into nonviolence. Rustin knew Gandhi. Rustin had met with Gandhi. Rustin was a devotee of nonviolence as a way of making social change. Dr. King, intellectually, and this is not made up, anyone can do this research, Dr. King was an intellectual supporter initially of nonviolence, but you also have to remember this man's family was under attack. People were shooting out his windows. They were doing everything they could to hurt him and his kids. He had guns in his home. He had people who had guns to try to protect and keep them alive. And it's Rustin who basically said, you can't have it both ways.
Right.
So that you need to trust what you are saying intellectually, believe and live into it. And so the guns came out, and Dr. King, I can only imagine reluctantly what human being, what man wants to put their family at risk, what mother wants to put their family at risk. I mean, in those crazy times, but he did what was later becomes really who he is, which is nonviolent. That's Rustin. Rustin, was his mentor was A. Philip Randolph. A. Philip Randolph is someone else who people don't really know. If you go to Back Bay Station, the Orange Line, there's a statue to Bayard Rustin, to A. Philip Randolph. Right there, he was the president of the Pullman Porters Union, which was, it would be like saying that someone was the president of the airline.
President of MBTA.
Or something like that.
Yes.
And so when you have those kinds of mentors who understand your vision, he was a highly intelligent, highly skilled community organizer, one of the best.
But it seems like he was also fearless.
Oh.
Fearless. You had to be during those times.
In those times.
Right.
And it also gives you a sense of the strength that came from within for him to still come forward and be so open about it in spite of people trying to get him away from Dr. King.
I think
it seems like that he was steadfast in his belief.
I think the challenges, as it is for many of us, if we realize it, the challenges can make you stronger if you are persevering.
Exactly.
And that's what Bayard Rustin did. And I look at him today as one of my mentors, really, because he's someone that has paved the way for a lot of the movement that happened within the civil rights.
It does, and there's a new study that just came out that looks at millennials' reaction to an awareness of AIDS and HIV, and it's very troubling. And what it reinforces for me as an okay boomer, that's the new thing of being,
is that the new name?
of what in some ways what millennials, the way in which they look at those of us who are part of the boomers is to go okay, and it's supposed to minimize us. But what I will own is we have not stayed on messages. We didn't stay on message around the civil rights movement because we had fatigue. We have not stayed on message around AIDS and HIV because we had fatigue. If you think about the trauma that so many of us went through, watching our friends die and wondering when would we be going, because we've been with them and doing the same things they've been doing, so why is this passing over us and not touching us? That trauma of thinking that when we got to protease inhibitors or ARTs that really was, it allowed us to breathe, but it meant that we weren't passing the message on to younger people who, in some ways, as these studies are showing, are exhibiting behaviors that look in some ways like the 80s in terms of not wanting to touch, not wanting to hug. They don't understand contagion. They don't have the information because it's not being talked about.
Lack of knowledge.
It's a lack of knowledge. And I had a young person say to me the other day, well, it's like getting diabetes. Who wants to get diabetes if you can prevent it?
I think this is a piggyback what Gary is saying in terms of even with the coronavirus is stay informed. Because I think even through the stages that we've gone through, and specifically when we talk about HIV/AIDS, it's like stay informed in terms of hearing what the CDC is saying, know yourself too in terms of how you take care of yourself, because that all plays an integral part in this as well.
Right. And don't panic.
Yeah, don't panic.
Don't panic.
Don't
We
panic.
panicked. There was panic in the 80s with the emergence of AIDS, late 70s. And some people would argue that this goes back even further in terms of some of the very first cases of AIDS or HIV or acquired immune deficiency or the gay plague, all those things that were labels that were used. But people panic because it's the unknown.
Right.
And so it's important for us to also think, if we go back and think about the emergence of HIV/AIDS, you also have to look at the political times. That was the time of Ronald Reagan. It was the emergence of a powerful conservative leader, sound familiar? And using that kind of conservative ideology as a way of thinking about, should we quarantine people? That was very much front and center during those times. And so I'm going to be paying attention with history, through the lens of history, to make sure that that language in these times, where some of that could be actualized in a less progressive time that we're in, that doesn't reemerge now.
If you could talk a little bit of some of the history of, in the 80s, when the AIDS epidemic came at the forefront, how did people handle it? How was information disseminated? And most importantly, what did people who wanted to know if they were infected, how did they get tested?
And Phil will remember this as well. In the early days of the epidemic, there were no tests, so there was not a way for you to know. So that's important. When a test did become available, there was no treatment, so why would you want to know if you're getting for many people, what was considered a death sentence? Why do I need to know that? We also look at a period of time in which we're coming out of the height of the sexual revolution across all segments of population to an illness that really is making you question your sexuality, your sexual identity, your sexual presence, your sexual agency. And so the times really are highly conflicted. The Times also made something, as only America will do, and I'm not going to say only America, other countries do it, but this is the country I live in. So I know firsthand, things become racialized. So this became something that had to do with Haitians as being a point of disease entry. So, it became very complicated. Hemophiliacs,
drug addicts.
Right. So all of the others.
All the others. And it became, as Gary's saying, so when we used the word panic, it was enough to create a panic. Because people were not knowing exactly. And to piggyback a point that he made, there was no test, and if you knew that this was going to be ultimately, as folks may have thought it to be, a death sentence, folks didn't want to go through those changes. So it is through the advent of organizations like AIDS Action that has helped foster and usher in another way of looking at how to deal with it, with the different programs that they created through their agency, and that took place in 1983.
Right. And to AIDS Action's credit, it responded. Larry Kessler, the founder, and I cannot, whenever I have the opportunity, I'm going to lift his name up, because had it not been for his vision, his passion, and quite honestly, his unwillingness to hear the word no. And I also will say his faith-based mission. To respond to something in a humanistic way, to be able, despite what other people were saying, to understand that people deserved care, and we had to step up and take care of our own community. And panic, as someone who was growing up or younger during that period, I was afraid too. We all were afraid because you didn't know.
You didn't know.
You didn't know. And so that fear, I understand. That fear, I understand.
And the fear is real.
Fear is very real.
It's all about this. We bring families attend this event with their kids. We got people come from all out of town to attend this event, because we also recognize people who are doing work in the community in all aspects. So this is just not just about Bayard Rustin, but Bayard Rustin set the stage for us to be doing this work. And everybody who does this type of work they have a vision. That's where it starts. Because it's not about them. It's about the people that they're trying to serve.
It's about the we. It's about the we.
We're going to be talking with the Bayard Rustin Community Breakfast. This is Lady B, and I'm going to hand it back over to Nigel Griffith. Go.
Thank you. So, Frank, before the break, we laid out some aspects of what, if you could share some insight on what AIDS Action really does in terms of being at the forefront of this epidemic. As we all know, you guys have been there for many, many years, but it's important to understand, to get this audience that's listening today, to get a better understanding. And if you could share some light on that, that would be helpful.
Sure. Thank you, Nigel. And one of the things that we love about AIDS Action and our partnership with Fenway is that we actually work to complement the work that we all do. So as Adriana had mentioned, they're working on research to create a vaccine, which is very exciting. But until we have that, AIDS Action still provides essential services to those that are living with HIV and AIDS. And those services include housing, which we all know is very tough here in Boston and greater Boston. But we have an excellent team that helps our clients remain stably housed or gets them out of unsafe situations so that they can become stably housed. This way that they focus on their medications and know that they can, work on other things such as making a living. We also have a pretty important legal team that helps a lot of our clients. Believe it or not, there's still discrimination for people that are living with HIV and AIDS. We have a case where a client divulged their HIV status, and when they went home sick, were called by the manager and told not to come back to work. Our legal team was able to get that person reinstated, got some sensitivity training that was created for not only the managers, but all of the person's coworkers, and got their lost wages reinstated as well. So that type of important work still exists, and we're still doing that. But until we have a vaccine, the other important part that we do is a lot of prevention. So we have a lot of great tools that can keep people protected. As Adriana had mentioned, there's PrEP, so that if you're HIV negative, you can take a pill and protect yourself from contracting the virus. You can, if you're HIV positive, you can get on a drug regimen, and with the goal of getting to undetectable. There's a big marketing campaign called U equals U, undetectable equals untransmittable. And what that means is when you are undetectable, the chances of you passing on the virus to somebody else is nearly zero. It's just as safe as using a condom. We don't we want to say it's good to use both, just because you're protected from HIV, but there are other things still out there that you're at risk of contracting if you don't use a condom. The other thing is that the virus is the communities that it's attacking or that it affects. It's disproportionate. So communities of color are infected at a higher rate than other communities. Latinos having sex with men are another community that's disproportionately affected. IV drug users have a disproportionate infection rate, as well as homeless youth. So what AIDS Action does is we have a needle exchange, and what we do is build relationships with people that are battling with addiction, and we work to get them into care, provide safe syringes so that they can stay safe. We have a drop-in youth center called Youth on Fire that focuses and provides services for homeless and at-risk youth from the ages of 14 to 24. And one of the other things that we just launched this year that I'm really excited to talk about is we have an Advocacy Academy, and the goal of that is to train HIV activists of tomorrow today.
This is just great information, and I think if you're just joining us, let me let you know who we have here today. We have Adriana Bolden, Community Engagement Manager at Fenway Health. We have Phil Robinson, a committee member of the Bayard Rustin Committee, a poet, and a BPS guidance counselor, a retired BPS guidance counselor, and Frank Castro, who is the Director of Development at AIDS Action. So as we continue this conversation, we hope, Frank, is there any information you would want to share with the listeners that if anyone out here that's listening to us today would like to get in touch with AIDS Action to just even start some conversation on how best they can help in their community or dealing with some of these issues that you just laid out, how can they do so?
Sure. Like if there is a housing question that you have, you can reach out to our housing team, and that phone number is 857-313-6770. If you are in need of legal services, you can contact our legal team at 617-450-1317. And if you just have a general question about the services that we provide, you can call our general number at 617-450-1313.
Thank you for that. Well, so, Phil, we turn to you. If possible, can you share what it means for AIDS Action Committee and the Bayard Rustin Committee coming together, which started this breakfast, community breakfast, almost 30 years ago? If you could share a little bit on that and how this partnership has developed to where it is today.
Thank you so much, Nigel. It's a pleasure to be here. I think the impetus for creating the Breakfast with AIDS Action, I have to commend them because they took the idea of wanting to not only merge the information that we have about HIV and AIDS at that time, going to back 30 years, but also to honor an openly gay black man known as Bayard Rustin and his social principles of social change and social justice. So in many ways, it's honoring him in terms of what he did single-handedly. Of course, there were others, but minus internet and text, in terms of making the March on Washington what it is. But succinctly, the AIDS Action Committee is working in sync with the Bayard Rustin Committee to put forth this important breakfast to help to eradicate the shame as well as the fear that many people were having then and still have as it relates to HIV and AIDS. So with the enormity of services, as Frank has mentioned, and the merger that they now have with Fenway Institute, we're able to provide, by way of discussion, open discussions with a large group of people, ways in which they can help themselves become more empowered. So it's information sharing definitely at the breakfast. And if I might just go right into the theme, if you don't mind.
Sure.
The reason why we selected this year's theme, which is partnership, leadership, and getting to zero, is because the ultimate goal of getting to zero in terms of zero infections is going to take the partnership and leadership of everyone, meaning everyone, not necessarily someone who feels they're a leader of a group, but the leadership within themselves, the partnership with partnershiping with AIDS Action and Fenway. And just like Bayard Rustin, it's kind of in sync with what he strived to do with the March on Washington in 1963. It might have been even called partnership, leadership, and getting to equality. Now we're getting to zero as it relates to infections. So we're on a continuum of still trying to help galvanize and empower communities of color, and specifically like the sub-communities that we're speaking of, not sub-communities necessarily, but the LGBTQ community of colors as it relates to getting them more aware, strengthened, less fear, and less shame as it relates to HIV and AIDS, because that's still kind of pronounced in a lot of communities, a sense of shame. Why did this happen to me? Why couldn't it not happen to me, et cetera? But for us to feel more empowered.
But also stigma, too.
And stigma,
Yeah.
yes.
So, Adriana, we have about 3 minutes left. If you could share your thoughts on leadership, partnership, and getting to zero, and then we'll go with Frank.
Absolutely. Leadership, partnership, and getting to zero, I think outside of what I mentioned before in terms of research participation, I just think this is a great self-mantra. You know, when you're thinking of operating as your higher self in general, you are showing up for yourself. You know, us coming together and having this conversation about bringing a greater awareness to HIV/AIDS prevention and treatment, you know, we're calling you to not just show up for us and for the cause, but for yourself. And that's that leadership piece that we're talking about. In partnership, there's power in numbers. And I think things come to fruition when we get together and recognize them, but also work together for them to happen. And, I really see us getting to zero. And there are different communities and cities around the world, places in California and in New York that are getting to this place and getting closer to their goals. And I see Boston, I see Massachusetts. We have the capacity to do that. And it's going to require us coming together to do it.
Thank you. Well said. Frank?
Yeah, I'm really excited about the theme as well, just because a different take on it as well is the importance of leadership is being your own leader for your own self-care, self-love, and meeting others that are doing the same thing and feel the empowerment. Because together, we can. It's exponential. We can do a lot more together than we can do by ourselves.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah.
Well said. Well, that's our show for today. I just want to thank Adriana Bolden from Community, who is the community engagement manager at the Fenway Health, Phil Robinson, who is a current member of the Bayard Rustin Committee, Frank Castro, who is the director of development at AIDS Action, and to the producers and those who work behind the scene to make this possible.
Well, the first lesson is don't try to repeat what you've done because we're in a different period. That's the first lesson. Second lesson is that protest is no substitute for the ballot box, which we have now. When we didn't have the ballot box, protest was the logical way. Once you have the ballot box, protest is useless. And the fact is you cannot get blacks into the ballot box. A third of the blacks who can vote go to vote. That's our problem.
Isn't it critically important for people to understand, though, that the movement was not just leaders, but it was individuals?
Oh yes, it was that's the reason we are not succeeding now. We got hundreds of thousands of people voting with their feet. Now we cannot get them to use their feet to go to the ballot box. And therefore there is not the involvement of hundreds of thousands of people today. We are depending on rhetoric and a few people in the Congress to solve our problems for us.
In that period, you were in Montgomery. You were one of the
Sure.
first. We've talked to Joanne Robinson and E.D. Nixon and others there. What do you think happened that sparked Montgomery? Why Montgomery?
Well, I think it was sparked largely because, as I say, on the one hand, you had this frustration building up for 9 years or 10 years on the part of these veterans who had come home. And on the second hand, you had Rosa Parks armed with a 1954 decision. And we had never had anybody who sat in the front of the bus before who could say to the bus driver, "You are breaking the law."
Good morning and welcome to the 31st Annual Bayard Rustin Community Breakfast. I'm Kimberly Wilson, one of the event's co-chairpersons, here to welcome you on this lovely Saturday morning. Before we begin, let us take a moment to remember our ancestors that have come before us, that paved the way for us to be here today. This year's theme is leadership, partnership, and getting to zero. This is a fitting call to action for all of us as we embark into a new environment. We are living with a new hope, promise, and a renewed energy. Today, we recognize two people in our global community that embrace the principles the awards they are receiving were named after. The first award is the Bayard Rustin for Bayard Rustin, who was a leader in the social justice movement for civil rights, nonviolence, wanted everyone's voice to be heard, just like the person who we are honoring today. The next award is in memory of Belinda Dunn, a woman that I can say I work with in getting the word out about her Who Touched Me ministry, a faith-based initiative. She was someone that tried to get the word out about HIV/AIDS to the greater community to make the world a better place. Like the person who we are honoring, who is working on getting services and getting the people in her community seen and treated fairly. Again, thank you for coming to our virtual breakfast this morning, and we hope you enjoy yourself.
Greetings from the Bayard Rustin Community Breakfast Committee. Good morning and welcome. My name is Nigel Griffith. I'm in my second year as co-chair of the Bayard Rustin Community Breakfast. This is the longest running iconic community event in its 31st year, which honors the inspiring energy of Bayard Rustin, a civil rights activist and a renowned architecture of the 1963 March on Washington. We are excited about this year's theme, leadership, partnership, and getting to zero. It resonates with our mission to align and intensify the connection which communities, organizations, civic, religious leaders, political alliance, and educational institution in a more unified effort to get to the objective of zero HIV infection. We realize that many of us for years have been working to eradicate HIV and AIDS, especially in our community of color. However, as Bayard Rustin knew back in his time, this quest cannot be done alone. We are at the point where we literally and figuratively need all hands on deck and dedicate hearts. So please continue to join us on your personal platform by ways of your vote for more funding, to expand resources, speaking to those political allies that listen about our needs to save lives, and never be afraid to believe we can make HIV and AIDS no longer exist in our lives. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pastor Jody Allison, and I serve as Senior Pastor of Powerhouse Church of Boston. As we proceed with today's program, I ask that you will bow with me for a moment of prayer. Father, Mother, Spirit God, we pause now as a sign that our faith rests in the promise that you never fail. We thank you for being God in our life. As we look over the years, we acknowledge that your divine hand has kept us from the devourer of a pandemic. We acknowledge that you have kept us from being a victim of mass shooting. You, O Lord, have kept us from the destruction caused by racism, homophobia, transphobia, and xenophobia. So God, on this day, we acknowledge this, that if it had not been for you who was on our side, we just don't know where we would be. So God, as we take this moment to appreciate the pioneers that shoulders we now stand upon, we simply would like to tell you thank you. Thank you because you have allowed the fighting spirit of our ancestors to live within us. As your promise was with our ancestors throughout the Middle Passage, throughout the bloodshed of the American Civil War, throughout the lynching of the Jim Crow era, so shall your promise be the same as we fight today's form of injustice that seeks to deny health care for all and ignore Black, queer, and indigenous bloodshed spilling into the streets. God, although our wrestle is not between flesh and blood, we pray that you will destroy the spirits that causes inequality and deprives us from living equitable lives. God, we turn to you in this hour because we have no further resolve. God, in your power and divine wisdom, you have reversed legislation that continue to oppress the poor and silence the suffering. God, elevate our voices as a unified symphony that cannot be silenced until justice becomes the air that we all share. God, we understand when the will of God and the will of the state conflicts, we as your children are compelled to follow the will of God. So in the spirit of Bayard Rustin and all of our ancestors, we say this in closing. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far along the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray. Amen.
We would like to thank all our corporate sponsors for this year's Bayard Rustin Community Virtual Breakfast event for 2021. Following sponsors are Gilead Science, Eastern Bank Charitable Foundation, Lockheed Lord, Boston University, Consulate of Canada, and Beth Israel Lahey Health. This event would not be possible with the sponsorship of these institutions. We thank you and we look forward to having your continuous sponsorship. Thank you.
In my statement, I cited the major lesson I had learned in fighting for human rights for 50 years for people all over the world. That lesson is simple. No group is ultimately safe from prejudice, bigotry, and harassment so long as any group is the subject to special negative treatment.
Segregation, separation, according to Jesus, is the basis of continuous violence.
I'm George Henry Hasty, a transgender man and long-term HIV survivor. I am thrilled and honored to introduce my friend, Miss Athena Vaughn, who is being awarded the Belinda Dunn Award for Courage. This award is named for Belinda Dunn, who we remember today, a fierce AIDS activist who founded an HIV outreach program for Black churches in Boston in the 1990s, and who during her own struggles with advanced liver disease due to hepatitis C, successfully fought a national battle to overturn the denial of organ transplants for people living with HIV. Belinda Dunn inspired me then, and Athena Vaughn inspires me now. Athena is a leader, a preacher, and a community mother to many. She is tenacious, she speaks truth to power, and she gets things done. And she deserves tremendous respect. I first met Athena many years ago at a Transgender Day of Remembrance event. A couple of years ago, I started attending her Kiki balls, Vogue competitions which lift up the creativity, the lives, and the health of young queer and transgender people of color who are disproportionately affected by HIV. Athena serves as president of the New England Ball Collective. Athena started doing community work as a teenager, and for close to 10 years, she has worked with AIDS Action and Fenway Health, helping transgender women navigate everyday challenges related to health risks, health care, health insurance, hormones, and housing. Athena is also vice president of the Transgender Emergency Fund, which provides critical assistance to low-income and homeless transgender people in Massachusetts. And as president of Trans Resistance Boston, she led last June's Trans Resistance March and Vigil, where thousands gathered at Franklin Park and marched to Nubian Square to protest the murder of George Floyd and so many others due to police violence, anti-Black racism, and violence against Black people, especially Black trans women. Athena is currently planning this June's Trans Resistance March. Here's Miss Athena Vaughn.
Good morning, good afternoon to the Bayard Rustin Planning Committee. I just want to say thank you for this prestigious award. And it's an honor and a privilege just to be given this award. I say it all the time that I don't do this work for accolades. I don't do this work to be honored. I do this work because I genuinely just love my community and want better for my community. I think this is an honor, knowing who Belynda Dunn was, also knowing that I was an employee of AIDS Action. And for those who don't know, it's best to do some research on Belynda Dunn. A few years ago, when I found out who she was, I actually was like ecstatic to find out that she actually was one of the originators of AIDS Action. So that was just like, wow. But I just want to say thank you. We have to continue to come together. We have to continue to still fight. We still have to continue to be together to continue to do what this community needs. Fortunately, I have to let you all know that I am no longer an employee of Fenway Health. As a trans Black woman, I'm always fighting and pushing and encouraging individuals to do things that are good for their mental health. And at this time, being at Fenway Health was not good for my mental health as a trans Black woman. I wish them the best. I also know that later on in the future down the line, we will be doing some collaboration steps together. So I'm happy about that. I'm not leaving the community. I'm still going to be here, still fighting, still pushing, still working, doing my best and due diligence when it comes to the LGBTQ community. So I don't have to be worried about that. And of course, still the assistant director of the Transgender Emergency Fund. I'm still the director and president of Trans Resistance. And as you all know, we will be doing part 2 of our march on June 12th of 2021 this year, meeting at the police station and marching all the way up until Franklin Park again, just to have a big celebration. If you're interested on helping, setting up or whatever, please feel free to join our planning committee. You can go to transresistancema.com and find out how to sign up to our planning committee. If you want to find out how you can donate to the Transgender Emergency Fund, please go to our website, transgenderemergencyfund.org. And please feel free to donate, or to Trans Resistance Mass and donate, or if you want to figure out how to help, or whatever, please feel free to follow up on our websites. And then we hope to see you all on June 12th as well. To the Bayard Rustin Breakfast Committee, Planning Committee, I'm just grateful and I'm humble. I wish I was able to be in the presence of you all this year, just because it's always a great time from the breakfasts I've went to that were at JFK. Was honored to be the first transgendered woman speaker for the Bayard Rustin Breakfast a few years back, and that was an honor. And then now, a few years later, to receiving this award is an honor as well. They say it takes a village to raise a child. I also believe that it takes a community to come together to right the wrongs of what it is that has been going on in the village. So remember, as a community, unless we continue to come together, there's going to be problems in our village. This is Athena Vaughn, President of Trans Resistance, Assistant Director of the Transgender Emergency Fund Advocate. Just saying thank you all for this award. Thank you all again. I hope to see you all soon.
Peace, everybody. My name is Toussaint Liberator. I'm very blessed to be a part of this show today. And I have a couple songs I want to share with you. First of all, I just want to say thank you to everybody that had a hand in getting me involved in this. And I hope you enjoy these songs. These are all original songs. I'm going to start with my first one, which is called Be You. All right, check it out. I didn't come to save your soul. Ain't a preacher man with the answers. Everybody different, but I believe it's for me. It still is the foundation upon which every day I'm living. Whatever gives you strength to be you. If you can be yourself, then what you gonna do? I know they trying to make it hard for you to take it. Hard to be alone, but be you, don't be a clone. Cause whatever gives you strength to break free, you best to run with that, cause otherwise you're gonna see your future days be bitter, cold, cold of winter. Why you gonna need your strength? You got to be you. That's all you can do. You got to be you. That's all you can do. Be you, baby. That's all you can do. You gotta be you, baby. That's all you can do. I didn't come to convert you. Just speaking of my thoughts really help me. Don't you be offended. The truth is that the love is pumping from my heart to the world, and it's really open-ended. Whatever gives you strength to be you. If you can be yourself, then what you gonna do? I know they trying to make it hard for you to take it. Hard to be alone, but be you, to be a clone. Cause whatever gives you strength to break free, you best to run with that, cause otherwise you're gonna see your future days be bitter, cold, cold of winter. Why you gonna need your strength? You got to be you. That's all that you can do. You gotta be you, baby. That's all that you can do. Be you, you. That's all you can do. That's all that you can do. Oh yeah. Be you. That's all that you can do. You gotta be you, baby. That's all that you can do. Be you, babe. Thank you.
Rustin described his multi-talented activity this way: I believe in social dislocation and creative trouble.
Hi everyone, my name is Frank Castro and I am the Director of Development for AIDS Action and Fenway Health. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and I look forward to a day when we can safely congregate in person sometime soon. It is my pleasure and extreme honor to introduce our recipient for the Bayard Rustin Award for Courage. This award is bestowed each year to a person of color that has been living openly and bravely with their HIV diagnosis while making significant contributions to HIV/AIDS awareness and prevention. Please join me in congratulating Oriol R. Gutierrez Jr. as our recipient for the 2021 Bayard Rustin Award for Courage. He is the editor-in-chief of Pause Magazine and Pause.com, a national award-winning magazine and website for people living with and affected by HIV/AIDS. Oriol has been kicking HIV's butt for almost 30 years since he was diagnosed in 1992. He is also the editorial director of Smart Plus Strong, the publisher of Pause, Pause.com, To Salud, a bilingual Spanish and English magazine for Latino health and wellness, and HET, a magazine for hepatitis. Oriol must not get much sleep because he also serves as the editor-in-chief for both the To Salud and HET. Oriol is a passionate advocate for those of us living with HIV. He often participates as a speaker, moderator, or panelist at various conferences and has appeared on various media channels like NY1, NPR, and SiriusXM. Oriol was also named as one of the 25 most influential LGBT Latinos by MyLatinoVoice.com. I hope you agree that Oriol is extremely deserving of this recognition, and please join me in welcoming him as our honoree and next speaker.
Thank you to everyone at AIDS Action and Fenway Health for this honor. I humbly accept the Bayard Rustin Award for Courage, named after the late civil rights and LGBTQ rights leader. If I share anything with Bayard Rustin, I believe that it's a commitment to uplifting community voices, which I get to do every day as editor-in-chief of Pause Magazine and Pause.com. So I am especially honored to receive this award at this year's event, which is themed Leadership, Partnership, and Getting to Zero. When I tested HIV positive in 1992 at the age of 22, I thought I'd be dead by 30. I'm now 50 years old and looking forward to a long life. I am where I am today in no small part due to the front and center leadership of people like Pause founder Sean Strube and countless other HIV advocates. Leadership matters, but leadership styles vary. As a more behind the scenes kind of person, I understand that not all of us are comfortable in the spotlight. Whatever your leadership style, I urge you to lead by example. You cannot expect others to rise to a challenge if you do not do so yourself. For some of us, that can mean boldly taking the bullhorn. For many of us, that can mean simply just doing our best. Either way, persistence counts. Partnership also matters. Going it alone is certainly possible, but working together can lead to great things. The HIV community is a beautiful example of partnership in action. So is Pause, which is why the entire Pause team, from staffers to freelancers, from past to present, also deserves credit for this award. From our launch in 1994, Pause has been a partner to the HIV community. Pause certainly was, and still remains, a partner in my journey, learning how to live with HIV. From where I sit, which at the moment is my home, and unfortunately not with all of you watching, I'm just doing my job. Nonetheless, it's heartwarming to be acknowledged. Despite the realities of COVID-19, getting to the end of the HIV/AIDS epidemic remains as important a goal as ever. Leadership and partnership are key to getting us there. Thanks again to AIDS Action and Fenway Health for this honor, and many thanks to everyone in the HIV community for your continuing partnership with Pause and with each other.
Bayard Rustin has said, "People will never fight for your freedom if you've not given evidence that you're prepared to fight for it yourself. And you have to join every movement for the freedom of people."
So this is a song that is meant to be a song of encouragement. A lot of times, especially with this last year that we've just experienced, sometimes we need that extra little bit of encouragement. So this is for everybody, no matter what you're going through, to remember that the sun is going to shine again. sun gonna shine again. Sun gonna shine again. I say, sun gonna shine again someday. I see the sun breaking through the clouds, pushing the rain away. I see the sun dipping through the clouds, pushing the rain away. Hey, sun gonna shine again. Sun gonna shine again. Sun gonna shine again someday. Hey, sun gonna shine again. Yeah. Sun gonna shine again. Sun gonna shine again someday. Oh, don't you worry, don't you cry. You wanna know why? 'Cause the sun gonna shine again. Oh, sun to shine again. Oh, yeah. Sun gonna shine again one day. Oh, one day. Yeah, yeah, someday. Someday. Oh, someday. All right. This last one is actually not an original song. This is something that I grew up singing in church. It was my first solo that I ever had to sing. So I'm gonna sing it for you. Though the storms keep on raging in my life, yeah. And sometimes it's hard to tell the night from day. Still that hope that lies within is reassured as I keep my eyes upon the distant shore. I know He'll lead me safely to that special place He has prepared. But if the storm don't cease, and if the winds keep on blowing, my soul has been anchored in the Lord. Ooh, though the storm keep on raging in my life, and sometimes it's hard to tell the night from day. Still that hope that lies within is reassured as I keep my light upon the
Darnell Williams, a well-respected Boston resident and community leader. Darnell Williams currently serves as Deputy Chief Diversity Officer, External Program for the Massachusetts Department of Transportation and the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority. He was the former president and CEO of the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts. Mr. Williams received an honorary Doctor of Human Letters from Worcester State University. He also received an honorary Doctor of Law from American International College. In addition, he was the recipient of the Boston 50th Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Breakfast Award. He was also recognized with a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Massachusetts Nonprofit Network. Mr. Williams earned his master's degree in Organizational Development and Adult Learning from Boston University after completing his undergraduate degree in Business Administration at American International College in Springfield, Massachusetts. Prior to joining the Urban League, Mr. Williams was manager of management, recruitment, and development at Massachusetts General Hospital, as well as a diversity and inclusion consultant in private practice. Mr. Williams was president of the Springfield branch of the National Association for the Achievement of Colored People and served as the president of the NAACP New England Area Conference. In 2011, the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts paved the way for additional conferences of color to come to Boston by hosting the National Urban League's annual conference in Boston after 35 years absence. And this was possible because of a leader like Darnell Williams. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm introducing your keynote speaker, Mr. Darnell Williams.
My name is Darnell Williams, and I'm so gratefully honored. And I want to bring greetings to the Bayard Rustin Breakfast Committee and your guests celebrating your 31st anniversary gathering this morning. As I stated, I'm humbled and honored that you would ask me to present to you and your awardees for this occasion. We spend an enormous amount of time and energy trying to demonstrate to people that we're educated, we're smart, we fit in, we're a part of this larger group or membership. Our entire system is predicated on groupthink, group behavior, group actions, and individuals must rise above the group in order to be recognized as a distinctive leader. People with the loudest voice oftentimes seem to fit that void or that bill. But I've learned in my living that oftentimes those loudest voices are not necessarily our best leaders. For example, bullies, intimidationalists, fearmongers, misogynists, terrorists, homophobics, demagogues, and extremists are all considered leaders in their various followings, but just leaders, what I believe, from the wrong sect. So we have to constantly adjust our sails in order to the ebbs and flow of our day. And then one day we kind of wake up and we take a step back and unplug from the matrix and fully realize that the narratives that they were pushing and that we were chasing it's not working. It's off kilter. The standard was never theirs. The standard was always ours. But you can't beat up on yourself because everybody wants to feel that they are part of a larger group or something larger than themselves. But what if the larger group and their thinking is wrong and wrong-headed. Should you continue with them, or should you stake out another path? Or even though that we know that something is wrong, we still contribute to be a part of that prototype membership? Because we are dealing with some of the same old battles that have become anew again, as if we never crossed that bridge before. The old enemies of justice have renewed their fight to keep us back, turn us around, and defeat our spirits. I just stopped by this morning to remind you and those that would listen to this presentation, I ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. God, you brought us too far on this journey to be tired. Not only are we fired up and ready to go, we have some young legs that are leading the way. The old warriors and the new advocates are coming together like we did in the past, and they've got it even with the knees that are on our necks. Our breathing might be restricted, but our thinking is clear. Our motives are pure. Our objectives have always been to uplift humanity. And I'm here to remind you that we shall overcome someday. But freedom has a cost. And the price that you have to pay is called sacrifice. Because it's a never-ending struggle. We're prisoners of hope. It's pushing. It's saying what we need to say out loud, what's wrong, and what needs to be fixed. And one thing for certain, we will never, ever suffer again in silence. Bayard Rustin was a Black intellectual. I say that affectionately. During a period of significant change in America. He was best known for his work as the organizer for the March on Washington in 1963. And every time I see a video clip of the March on Washington, I catch a glimpse of him, Mr. Rustin, standing right behind every known speaker at the podium, puffing on a cigarette, looking so cool. He was tactical. He was a moral spokesperson. He was committed to the Gandhian principles of nonviolence. Bayard Rustin was an intellectual resource, not only for Dr. King, but A. Philip Randolph, Roy Wilkins of the NAACP, Whitney Young from the National Urban League, Dorothy Irene Height, and James Farmer. He was an organizer for the Montgomery Boys Boycott from 1955 and 1956. And we know how successful that boycott turned out to be. He drew up the original plans for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. We know it as the SCLC. Bayard Rustin was a Quaker. He was a pacifist. He was a human rights activist all of his life. He was in prison as a conscientious objector during World War II. He was also a founding member of CORE in the 40s, Congress of Racial Equality. In 1960s and 70s, he headed the A. Philip Randolph Institute. And he was smack dab in the middle of that big, serious debate that we had around Black power and Black consciousness movement. In my humble opinion, he was one of the most significant, important figures in our civil rights movement and social reform. That's why I came up with labels don't define leadership. I also want to remind the audience this morning that we worked along with the Department of Health and Human Services, the Urban League here in Boston, and the NAACP. And we were one of the few groups that provided HIV/AIDS testing where their identity was protected and protected like it should be. But we were successful and it was confidentially done. And I'm very proud that I was part of that effort. But when I grew up in Gary, Indiana, during the period of that time of the March on Washington and all of the things that we did in the early 60s and late 60s, our primary source of information about Black people, because I grew up in Gary, Indiana, we got it from the Jet magazine or Ebony or the Chicago Defender. Those were my primary, and I saw myself in those magazines because I was looking at it through the lens of people who looked like and had experiences of life as we knew it. But I go to this label thing only because it's personal. I remember distinctly going to the store with my mother, and she would buy mayonnaise, detergent, toothpaste, soap, rice, salt, sugar, lard, etc. And we didn't know why she picked those items, but when we became adults, we bought the same items. And our children saw us purchase those similar items, and so they saw what we bought, so that's what they bought or buy. Miracle Whip versus Hellman. Tide versus Cheer. Crest versus Colgate. Dull, Dive, or Avery. And you can think about now that we've graduated, we moved on to Bath Gel. Or Morton Salt, or Domino Sugar. We had Aunt Your Mama pancake mix and Original Grits and Uncle Ben's rice. All we knew that lard just came in a can, and whether it was Crisco, but now we have graduated that we extra fine olive oil. But I'm here to report to you that fried chicken and the chops and whatever else that found itself into that lard was probably some of the best dishes you ever had growing up. My premise in then giving you that memory lane is really simple. We're generationally hardwired into hearing and seeing judgments about labels. And then we adopt the labels. We grow up with these labels. We pass on the labels without knowing the real meaning or the purpose of the labels. This morning is just that I just want to remind you how labels don't define and dictate leaderships. Labels don't begin to tell you how to define somebody's contributions. Labels have no bearing on a person's ability to be strategic. Labels will never, ever be able to show the level of a person's courage and commitment in the face of adversity. So despite being labeled, Bayard Rustin went beyond the labels. He inspired me, and hopefully you, to understand that he was very, very deliberate and moved beyond the labels. He moved beyond the conservative confines of his day. He ran past hard the religious beliefs of the moment. He showed us then and now. He was bold. He was courageous. He was insightful. He was funny. He was a practical joker. He was political and very spiritual. But most importantly, he had this nonviolent streak that ran through all of his activities. It had to be a crowning moment for him to see the March on Washington unfold before his very eyes. Not only was he such a significant part of that historical event, but he was much more to me. He was what I call a beacon of light and the glue. And before I close, I want to especially remind you and those in the audience today that have not joined and become a supporter of AIDS in Action Coalition. HIV/AIDS needs you. They need your time, they need your treasure, and they need your talent. And so if you give those things to them, then I believe that we will all have done our part. And all it takes is just each one, teach one, lift one, bring one, unlabel one, then we can make a difference. And in closing, I can hear Bayard Rustin singing in my ear, and in my spirit and in my soul. I ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I've come this far by faith. We marched too long. We bled too much. We sang too many songs. My feet have always been tired, but my soul is renewed because we will keep our eyes on the prize. Labels will never, ever stop us from getting where we belong. Thank you for having me here this morning.
Black gay activists should try to build coalitions of people for the elimination of all injustice.
Good morning, all. My name is Liz Roderick, and I'm the events manager here at Fenway Health. I've had the privilege and honor of working with this committee for the Bayard Rustin Community Breakfast for the last 6 months or so. And it has been truly an honor and so much fun to work with the members of this committee, learn more about Bayard Rustin, and help make this event possible. So thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I'm here to present a very important person, Fenway Health's CEO, Ellen LaPointe. Ellen is not new to Fenway, but she's new to this committee. I know she's looking forward to meeting you all very soon in person. She arrived at Fenway about a year ago, her first week being in March 2020. So you can imagine what those first few weeks were like for her. We needed her leadership so desperately then, and we certainly need it now. She has served in a variety of roles across public health, social justice, and LGBTQIA+ organizations for the last 3 decades. We're so grateful to have her here, and it is my honor and privilege to welcome her now. Please welcome Fenway's CEO, Ellen LaPointe.
Hello, my name is Ellen LaPointe, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Fenway Health. I use she/series pronouns. Welcome to the AIDS Action Committee Bayard Rustin Community Breakfast. I want to begin my remarks with a land acknowledgement. I want to recognize and honor that Fenway Health is situated on land that is the territory of the Massachusetts and their neighbors, the Wampanoag and Nipmuc peoples. This is a step towards honoring the truth, making the invisible visible, and correcting the American stories that erase Indigenous peoples' tribal history and culture. I was asked to tell you a little bit about myself, so I'll take just a moment to do so. I've spent my career working to advance equity, social justice, and the health and well-being of people and communities. I'm a connector by nature. Throughout my career, I've led mission-driven organizations that bring people and communities together in pursuit of a shared vision for a better future, helping them create the conditions to succeed. Doing this work energizes and inspires me. I was so honored to be invited to become CEO of Fenway Health. I've been an admirer and follower of the work of this organization since I began my work in the fight against HIV in the late 1980s. In the year I've been here, my pride and admiration for this team and the work that we do has only continued to grow. This event is named for Mr. Bayard Rustin. Mr. Rustin played an extraordinary role in the civil rights movement. To give you just a few examples, he was an organizer of the first Freedom Ride in 1947. He was a planner of the Montgomery bus boycotts in 1955, and he was a primary architect of the March on Washington in 1963. He was a leader, both gay and Black, at a time when the fact of either or both could land a person in jail or worse. People distanced themselves actively from him publicly because he was gay. As a result, he accomplished much of his important work behind the scenes. President Barack Obama awarded Mr. Rustin the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously in 2013. This breakfast is modeled after Mr. Rustin's deep commitment to the principles of social justice and change, which guided him at all times. AIDS Action Committee and Fenway Health have been proud supporters of this milestone event for 31 years. Fenway is so proud to be marking our 50th year of service this year. We were founded to serve under-resourced and marginalized communities. Centering racial equity is critical to the mission of Fenway Health, and we know that we need to do more to center racial equity in everything that we do. We must work to undo disparities and inequities that exist in the services we provide, the people we reach, and the outcomes we achieve. We have committed to taking the necessary actions to ensure that our entire organization is engaged in this transformational effort. Everyone within the organization is involved in this work. Our board of directors, organizational leadership, staff, and volunteers. I want to take just a moment to highlight a few of the major efforts that are underway at this time. First, I'm excited to tell you that we'll be announcing the appointment of an Executive Vice President of Racial Equity and Social Justice in the coming days. This individual will report directly to me and will work closely with the staff, leadership, and board to shape and drive our efforts to be a diverse, anti-racist, equitable, and inclusive organization. We're developing a racial equity action plan that will be integral to the 5-year strategic plan that we will announce this summer. We've established a health equity task force that is utilizing a data-driven approach to identify and overcome health inequities among our patients and clients. We're working to develop our capacity to have difficult conversations together, recognize and address conscious and unconscious bias and microaggressions in the workplace. And we are doubling down on our efforts to ensure that our board of directors has diverse representation, lived experience, and perspectives. Today, our 20-member board is one of the most diverse in our history. The challenges the COVID-19 pandemic have posed over the last year have been epic, demanding so much of us at the same time that every member of our team grappled with the enormous strain the pandemic has placed on us personally. But here's the thing, we were prepared. Through our work in the early days of the HIV/AIDS epidemic and continuing to this day, we have a rich and deep legacy of rising to the challenge and leading the charge in moments just like this. You might even say we helped write the book on how to respond with expertise, deep compassion, and hope during times of crisis and uncertainty. It's not over, to be sure. We still have a long way to go before this pandemic is behind us. To that end, we have created a COVID-19 vaccine equity task force to identify Fenway Health patients who are living in neighborhoods hardest hit by COVID-19, which are predominantly BIPOC neighborhoods. We have developed outreach strategies to connect patients who are hesitant about the vaccine to the information they need to make informed decisions for themselves and to assist them with access if they choose to get vaccinated. We forged an exciting partnership with the Boston Black COVID-19 Coalition to demonstrate how health institutions like Fenway Health and Black-led and Black-serving organizations can work together effectively to address systemic racism in healthcare. There will be much more in the work in the months and years to come. We are committed to remaining on this journey. So again, it is an honor to be here. I am so looking forward to the day when we can all be together in person again. In the meantime, thank you for your support of this wonderful event and for all that you do.
The organizers and perpetuators of segregation are as much the enemy of America as are any foreign invader.
Bayard Rustin once said, "Let us be engaged about injustice, but let us not be destroyed by it." On behalf of the entire Bayard Rustin Community Breakfast Committee, we would like to thank each of you for joining us today. We know that this past year has been very difficult for us all during this pandemic. The real truth is that we have been dealing with several pandemics in our nation and around the world for many years, such as human rights, racial equality, economic disparity, injustice against people of color and minorities, equal justice for all, accessible medical equality, discrimination against the LGBTQ community, and still today, 40 years later, we are dealing with HIV and AIDS discrimination in order to give those in our community that are less fortunate the best information and resources to help them live healthier and better lives. AIDS Action and Fenway Health Institution has shown true leadership in the fight for equal healthcare and helping to make the lives of people in our communities better and healthier every day. AIDS Action and Fenway Health also leads the states on getting to zero on its coalition and initiative, which seeks and aims to reduce the number of HIV and AIDS infections in our nation and our local communities by developing partnership to help with this needed endeavor. Finally, We hope that you enjoyed this year's Bayard Rustin Community Breakfast virtual event. As we begin to look forward to celebrating our 32nd Bayard Rustin Community Breakfast event next year, the Bayard Rustin Committee will continue to honor and recognize those that are working to help make a huge impact on the lives of all those that are living disproportionately and those that are living with HIV and AIDS among us, as we continue this fight collectively and together. Thank you for joining us around the United States and around the world. We look forward to seeing you next year. Thank you.
I would like to thank all of our corporate sponsors for backing us this year, and the members of the Bayard Rustin Community Luncheon Committee, and Michael Wanson for all your help in making this event a success. And most of all, I'd like to thank you, everybody out there who's joined us for our virtual event today. Thank you, and we hope to see you next year. And we'd like to invite everybody out the first Sunday in June. Come walk with the Bayard Rustin Walk Run team at the AIDS Action Fenway Health Walk. Good day. Bye.
Don't cease. And if the wind keep on blowing, my soul has been anchored in the Lord. I realize that sometimes in this life we're gonna be tossed by the waves and the currents that seem so fierce. But one thing I like about it, in the Word of God, hey, got an anchor. Keep me steadfast, steadfast, unmovable in time. But if the storms, they just don't cease, and just in case the winds, they keep on blowing in my life, my soul has been anchored in the Lord. Thank you very much. Blessings to each and every one of you, and I look forward to working with you in the future.